this week's drive, we take to the grass, step into the past and look to the future, visit a royal collection, and race on the hard streets of the Isle of Man. All this and more in this week's Drive. We start this week at the Euro Speedway at Lausitz near Dresden in eastern Germany for the third round of the Ascar Championship. These are the Anglo-American stock cars, Europe's version of NASCAR. Steve Hodgson made a dream start and Nicholas Manayasen squeezed into second, leaving pole sitter Kelvin Burt trailing in third. Manayasen pulled out a 3-second lead while the hard-charging Plato put Hodgson under extreme pressure. The pair reeled the Frenchman in, and by lap 36, Manayasen's lead was less than 0.2 of a second. Jason Plato moved up to second place, forcing Hodgson onto the grass. 180 miles an hour grass tracking. While this battle was building to a conclusion, White had pulled himself back into leadership contention and passed Plato for second place, slipstreaming past with 5 of the 50 laps remaining. And soon afterwards, the lead was wrestled away from Manayasen. White went to take his second victory from 3 races with a margin of 1.29 seconds. Plato finished third with Hodgson fourth. Toby Scheckter, son of 1979 Formula One world champion Jody, was 8th. The Caribbean island nation of Cuba isn't a place that hosts a lot of motorsport. With long-running sanctions, most things motoring are locked in a kind of 1950s time warp, although some things are perhaps best done the traditional way. The sunny resort of Santiago de Cuba hosted the opening round of a different sort of racing, one without wheels, aquabike racing. The first round of the Ski Pro World Championship got underway in ideal conditions. As riders raced through the spray and around the demanding course, Alberto Monti of Italy was initially well back in the pack on number 001, but he soon worked his way to the front, showing continuing form after taking the world title in 2001 by winning the final 2 races. Croatian Dalibor Tokovic on number 35 also worked up through the field and was to eventually place third. Italian Angelo Bertozzi on number 22 challenged early on, but dropped back to take 5th place at the end. Spanish rider David Sellers on number 11 worked through to challenge for the lead. But Sellers wasn't having it his own way, as fellow Spaniard Narcis Pujol takes 2nd place. For several laps, there was a furious battle for the lead as the 2 Spaniards fought with Monti. Sellers eventually put Pujol behind him to clinch 2nd, but Pujol was put back to 4th by the Croatian Turkovic. In the second part of the event, for freestyle moves, Brazilian Alessandro Lenzi claimed 2nd with this over and under display. The 2001 freestyle world champ Federico Bufacci of Italy was 3rd. Mark Sickerling of Germany took 1st place by going under the judges' boat. 5 more races are scheduled for this season for France, Russia, Italy, Poland and Germany. Ask some of these people how they spent their weekends, and you might be surprised at the answer. Ordinary folk are getting a taste of the thrill-seeker's adrenaline rush in a muddy bog in Sussex in England. They're taught to drive through hair-raising conditions in special vehicles by instructors as part of the so-called activity days industry. In the UK, the market has almost doubled in size over the last 2 years. Analysts found the sector was worth about £60 million in the year 2000, rising to some £100 million in the following year. They suggest it'll be worth £240 million by 2005. The sector is made up of companies offering experiences like skydiving, abseiling or whitewater rafting that ordinary people wouldn't normally have the chance to try. Established in 1989, London-based Red Letter Days is the biggest and is now worth an estimated £25 million.
And Red Letter Days was started at the end of the 80s, and really the concept was, what do you give the man who has everything? And it really was just very much a gut instinct of mine that this could be the idea for a fantastic business. And as we grew, we just started feeding more and more ideas into the business, listening to what customers wanted and building it like that. I don't think at the beginning we had any idea just how big it could grow.
Activity days are sold to a mixture of private and business clients. The adrenaline rush is said to carry on into people's work and social lives.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, what can I say? Just being up there, it's cool, really cool.
That was fantastic. I was really nervous. That dip felt huge. I just feel like I could tackle anything now. I'm invincible. It was marvellous.
Whatever the feeling, it's big business. And it wouldn't be England if some rain didn't fall, just to keep things nice and muddy.
Motorist fatigue is the third biggest killer on Australian roads. Long-distance travel is common in this enormous country, particularly at holiday times. Despite campaigns to persuade drivers to revive and survive every 2 hours, many don't, with tragic consequences. This gadget could help change all that. Sarah Lau's research team at Sydney's University of Technology is testing brainwaves during monotonous tasks such as a long drive on outback roads.
It's the transitional period in between an alert and a fully asleep stage, and we're trying to home in during the transitional phase to find out what's happening in the brain during a fatigue state.
Volunteers are tested using up to 19 electrodes connected to a computer readout. Blue and green means the subject is alert, red shows drowsiness. The task now is to create a practical device based on these experiments, which would alert drivers when they're getting tired.
We hope that they would have some electrodes installed in a cap which they would wear on their head, or perhaps some little suction electrodes that may be stuck onto various parts of the brain.
The Australian government's backing this work, hoping the technology reduces the toll of deaths on the road, particularly in the trucking and bus industries. It could also have applications for nurses and doctors working long hours. A prototype drowsiness device should be ready by early 2003.
Car industry watchers can often become obsessed with the next new piece of technology to come along, or the next new model. But often it makes sense to keep an eye on history and what made the cars, designs and models of yesteryear successful. Many famous names have vanished from the high streets and showrooms of today. Some of the names have been bought by other companies and are kept alive, while others are gone forever. One famous name which disappeared and seemed lost forever was Maybach, Germany's equivalent of England's Rolls-Royce. Maybach built impressively smooth and luxurious cars between the two world wars, but never resumed production after the conflict. The Maybach name was bought in 1961 by Daimler-Benz, builders of Mercedes. Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach had a close friendship long before the first car rolled over the bumpy roads back in 1886. Maybach helped develop Daimler's petrol engine, and after Daimler's death, Maybach left the company and founded his own factory, mostly supplying engines for the huge Zeppelin airships. In 1921, Maybach's son Karl decided to launch his own car, specializing in large luxury vehicles with softly purring engines. The cars were the delight of the aristocracy and were in demand in places where names like Rolls-Royce, Bugatti and Bentley were common too. Now Mercedes is to resurrect the Maybach name in a super saloon which embraces all the attributes of the pre-war Maybach models. It will be big, expensive, rare, powerful, handmade, quiet and utterly luxurious, just like its namesake of more than 60 years ago. The new car is made of a secret composite fibre material and is either 5.7 or 6.2 metres long, depending upon the model ordered. It is expected that most Maybachs will be driven by chauffeurs, so the rear cabin boasts as many features as the front. 2 broad seats are electrically reclinable, there are 2 phones and an internet link, the roof is electrochromic self-tinting glass, and there's a 20-inch TV screen and both video and DVD players. The Maybach has a turbocharged V12 6-litre engine which produces huge reserves of power and torque, while the chassis offers every high-tech braking, suspension and safety aid imaginable. The Sultan of Brunei is said to have placed an order. And the price? Well, if you have to ask, you don't really need to know. We stay with royalty and go now to Jordan. When the late King Hussein married his second wife in 1960, Princess Muna got a man with a huge passion for boys' toys. The happy couple drove through the streets of Amman in an open-topped car, unthinkable in today's security climate. Now, more than 60 of the late monarch's classic and vintage vehicles are on display at a new Royal Car Museum. Here's the same Mercedes-Benz Cabrio wedding car, looking just as perfect as it did on that wedding day back in 1960. It joins many other vehicles that were a part of the life of the charismatic monarch, who was the region's longest surviving ruler. The museum took 2 years to complete and sits on a hilltop in the newly constructed Al Hussein Park, west of the city. Several showrooms house the cars and motorcycles, some dating back to the early 20th century. The late king wasn't particular about where his cars were built. A classic Mercedes Gullwing shares the floor with a 1948 Packard. As part of Jordan's Independence Day celebrations, King Abdullah inaugurated the Royal Car Museum in Al Hussein Park, featuring the personal automobile and motorcycle collection belonging to his late father. Most of the cars on display were used by the late King Hussein, either during national celebrations, for leisure, or during car events in which he competed. This museum has been opened for people to give them a chance to see the late King Hussein's cars. There are 57 cars housed in the museum. This Lincoln car has been used during His Majesty King Hussein's marriage, and also Prince Mohammed's marriage. His Majesty King Abdullah also used it during his marriage to Queen Rania. King Abdullah was crowned using this car, and all the king's important guests used it. In this Mercedes, King Hussein survived a failed assassination attempt in an ambush by radical Palestinians in 1970. The oldest car in the museum is this 3-litre 8-cylinder 1916 Cadillac with a top speed of 75 kilometres an hour. All the vehicles in the museum are in perfect running order and have been either restored or maintained to exacting standards. Often they're in far better condition than when they left the factory, however many years ago. Some cars were gifts from other world leaders. For example, a Rolls-Royce was given to the Jordanian king by King Fahd of Saudi Arabia. And this 1956 Cadillac was a gift from former US President Dwight D. Eisenhower. The king enjoyed kart racing and motorcycling too, his collection spanning vintage to ultra-modern machines. The king was quite fond of this quirky but rare 1960s amphi car. This Belgian four-cylinder FN motorcycle was built in 1909 and is one of just a handful in the world which has survived nearly a century later. The King, an accomplished pilot of both helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft, also enjoyed competition driving and bought this Ford Cosworth Works rally car. In 1994, the King raced the car in the Al Ruman hill climb event. On that occasion, the King was partnered by the great Dubai driver Mohammed bin Sulayem, who has won the Jordan International Rally a record 11 times and the Middle East Rally Championship 6 times. Crown Prince Abdullah, now the King, was on hand to watch his father. Future plans for the Al Hussein Park site include another museum currently under construction, which is to contain the awards and medals that King Hussein received during his nearly 40-year reign. The historic tourist trophy motorcycle races are run every year on the Isle of Man. The course is a 37-mile tour of towns, bridges, walls, and a flat-out blast over the mountain. David Jeffries started first, having been quickest around the circuit in practice. Racers set off alone, 30 seconds apart. Scotsman Jim Moody was next away. The TT has been held annually since 1907, barring the war years. Jeffries set a record time of 18 minutes exactly for the first lap, then broke it again with a time of 17 minutes 52.2 on his second lap, an average speed of 126 miles an hour. John McGuinness sets off for his 6-lap tour of the island. The riders race through obstacles like post boxes, curbs, trees and drain covers scattered along the roads. Fog and mist on parts of the circuit are often a hazard too. Jason Griffiths sets off. Jim Moody was down to 5th as he raced through Quarter Bridge. Ian Duffus sets off on his journey. The nature of the course can be seen as Jeffries races through Glenvine. McGuinness rounds Quarter Bridge. Watch as Jeffries drags his knee on a public road before setting off across the mountain. Ian Loffer was 19.5 seconds behind the leader in 3rd place. On the next lap, the riders came in for fuel and a tyre change. Leader Jeffries makes the obligatory stop first. Richard Britton on the mountain. Moody and Archibald stop for fuel, but Archibald's run dry and has to be pushed to his pit. Jeffries' lead was around 1 minute at the end of the 4th lap, but on the last lap his Suzuki locked in 3rd gear and that advantage began to disappear. He didn't dare try to change gear in case he lost drive completely, so the bike was revving hard on the open sections. Nevertheless, Jeffries crossed the finish line over 35 seconds ahead of John McGuinness, with Jim Moody 3rd. The winner's average speed was 123.38 miles an hour for almost 2 hours of racing. The Zeppelin airship, once a symbol of German power and grace in the skies, hasn't been seen since the Hindenburg disaster. Between the 2 world wars, German airships provided luxury transatlantic transport, carrying over 2,600 people from Germany to New York and Rio de Janeiro. The old airships were filled with flammable hydrogen, and the 800-foot-long Hindenburg exploded in flames after docking at Lakehurst, New Jersey in 1937. But a modern airship is back above Berlin. Now, a completely redesigned airship is offering people the chance to float above the German capital for the first time in 65 years. The first successful dirigible, a balloon that has engines to control its horizontal movement, was built in France in 1852. Although other countries also built this type of airship, the Germans quickly became the most advanced in this form of lighter-than-air technology. Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, a German businessman, built a fleet of experimental dirigibles, and the name stuck. In recent years, the descendant of the Zeppelin company has developed a new, smaller airship, now using helium rather than the flammable hydrogen of pre-war Zeppelins. The Deutsche Zeppelin Reederei GmbH has started taking tourists for hour-long rides over Lake Constance at €335 a time. Because the airships travel at low altitudes and relatively slowly, the windows in the cabin can be very large, which allows great visibility for pilots and passengers alike. The limited run of Berlin flights starts at Tempelhof Airport, itself a masterpiece of Nazi-era Third Reich architecture dating back to the old Zeppelin's heyday. The last pre-war Zeppelin flights over Berlin came amid a blaze of national pride and celebration, including the 1936 Olympics. Only 12 passengers fit in the new Zeppelin, a fraction of the number that could ride in the original with its sleeping compartments and elegant dining room. The pilot tells passengers they are free to move about the cabin, but asks them to hold onto seats rather than touching the windows, so as not to leave fingerprints and spoil the view for others. Surprisingly, many of today's passengers are old enough to remember the glamour of the old Zeppelin and are fulfilling long-held dreams to ride in one. Other airships, such as advertising blimps, have flown over Berlin in recent times, but they didn't carry paying tourists. The more slender new Zeppelin cuts a distinctive figure over the city's skyline that reminds people of the past. The main difference is that with a Zeppelin you fly very smoothly. A helicopter sometimes is not so stable, and above all, it is loud. In the Zeppelin you can have a normal conversation. It's an enjoyable way of travelling. It's great for sightseeing and taking pictures. You can move about freely, and we have these nice panorama windows. These are all reasons for people to feel that they want to fly it. The future will show that Zeppelins can be used in many different ways. I am thinking of using them as camera platforms to film sports and other events, and also to observe things and to watch nature. Und natürlich auch als Plattform, Sachen zu beaufsichtigen aus der Luft, zu überwachen von mir aus und natürlich auch Natur zu beobachten. The first Zeppelin made its debut in July 2nd, 1900, when crowds saw a cigar-shaped 128-meter-long airship designed by Ferdinand Graf von Zeppelin rise above Lake Constance in southern Germany. The first of the great long-distance passenger dirigibles, the Graf Zeppelin, went into service in 1928. The 245-meter-long Hindenburg, only slightly smaller than the Titanic, followed in 1936. The Nazis later used the Zeppelin for propaganda purposes and painted swastikas on its tail. Photos of the airship near city landmarks such as the Brandenburg Gate became popular postcards. 4,500 passengers have flown with the ship since her inaugural flights last year. In the future, the company hopes to bring tourist Zeppelins to other European cities such as Paris, London and Venice. We'll end this week on that peaceful note, but so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.